What's up, guys? So I remember like it was yesterday. We were playing Cal State Northridge. It was about, I think it was 3rd and 10. It was 3rd and 10 on our opponent's, I think it was 11-yard line, right? 11-yard line or so. And I remember like it was yesterday, I remember covering the receiver, right? And having good coverage on him, backpedaling. I could see the quarterback. I could feel the receiver on my hip, right? So I had what I thought was good coverage, right? And then as I turn, I see the quarterback, right? I see his front shoulder kind of raise, right? And tap the ball, which in football as a cornerback is a sign that the quarterback is about to throw the football, right? So I'm in good coverage. It's 3rd and 10. I'm anticipating a break-off route for the first down, maybe, right? But I have coverage just in case he goes deep. Hey, Sheila. So I have good coverage. I feel the receiver here, right? I see the quarterback raise his shoulder up, tap the ball, right? Which is a sign of a ball to come. And then I see him release the football, right? I see him throw the football. I can see it in the air. I'm running. I'm stride for stride with the receiver. So I feel pretty good about either the ball going over both of our heads, right? Or me being in position to knock the ball down, right? I'm pretty confident. So we're running stride for stride. The ball's in the air maybe 20 yards, 20, 30 yards in the air. Maybe 35 yards. And we're both sprinting, and I feel like the ball is going to be too far for either of us, really, because I have good coverage, either of us to get to it, right? So the ball's in the air, right? I'm running. I can still feel him on my back hip, right? I forgot his name. I think it was Dominguez. It was a Hispanic receiver. Very short, not very short, sorry. Very quick, shifty receiver. The scouting report said he wasn't super fast, but very shifty. So I remember that about him. So I knew either he was going to break it off and get a first down, or I had good coverage. Okay, so the ball's in the air. I'm watching the ball. The ball, again, appears to be going over both of our heads. So I feel confident about either knocking the ball down or neither of us getting to it. But what happens is, I'm stride for stride, and all of a sudden, a burst of speed comes out of this receiver, and he runs by me. He runs by me with a burst, right? I'm at my top level speed, I think, or at least I didn't want to, or I didn't kick into another gear. He did, right? So now he runs by me, right? And I remember like it was yesterday. I remember diving for the ball, which was too far, and him catching the ball. And all I could see, literally, I hit the ground, I bounced a couple of times, and I could see his towel just waving. And it was like the whole crowd went silent. Like literally from a roar in the air, we're at Cal State Northridge at their field, to complete silence, it felt like. I bounced, hit the ground, and I'm watching this guy go from the 50 to the 40 to the 30 to the 20 in almost slow motion, right? And I remember what a horrible feeling that was, because if I remember correctly, and to this day I think it's true, that was the first time I had given up a touchdown in high school or college that I remember, right? It just so happened it was a 90-yard touchdown, right? So I remember being in shock almost for the half of the game, right? Thinking, how the heck did I give up a touchdown, let alone a 90-yard touchdown, right? So we lost that game, I think. I don't even remember, to be honest with you. I think we lost. But all I remember is literally that play, running full speed, being in what I thought was good coverage, the ball going over what I thought was our head, him bursting out of nowhere to catch the ball, me hitting the ground, my head bouncing, and me watching him, just him, ahead of us running, and then guys running by me to celebrate as they score a touchdown. Right? So that was a Saturday. We fly back to UC Davis. Right? We have practice on Monday. We have film study on Monday. And I remember not wanting to go to school or practice. I didn't want to go to school and read the school paper, how Bobby Bluford got beat for a 90-yard touchdown. I didn't want my classmates to see and have to look them in the eye and be embarrassed about what had happened. Even though it was a away game, they didn't see it in person. They saw it in the paper. And I sure enough didn't want to go to practice and have to go through film study and watch a 90-yard touchdown that, again, was the first one I can remember giving up since high school, before high school, right? So I did what a lot of us do, right? I tried to run and hide from that embarrassment, from that pain, right? From that failure, right? So, and that has happened many times in my life. I remember tripping and falling at a school lunchtime function, right? A rally. I remember coming out and they were calling the football team out, and they called the starting defense, and they said Bobby Bluford. I came out and I tripped. I didn't fall to the ground, but I tripped enough to be embarrassing, right? For the whole school to laugh at me, right? I remember being in middle school, having to give a report on Grenada, of all places, right? I think we had a military conflict in Grenada, and I gave a talk about it, a speech about it. And I remember being frozen for like 5 minutes, and I couldn't even speak. I had prepared for like a week, stressing about it, and I literally couldn't say a word. And I remember that next Monday being terrified to go to school, right? I remember faking that I was sick, right? Put my thermometer under the light bulb, telling my mom that I was sick, right? Trying to get sick on purpose, leaving my window open, trying to get sick. I wanted nothing to do with facing that failure, with facing that embarrassment, right? And so that happens, or has happened, throughout my whole life, right? And I'm sure you have faced similar things, right? You feel overweight now. You don't want to go to that reunion, or you feel like you're not ready for this board meeting. Whatever it is, we are so afraid of failure that we hide from it, right? That we try to avoid it, that we try to pretend it didn't happen, right? But what if we did the same thing that the University of Virginia did yesterday? Right? If you didn't watch the championship game yesterday, Virginia, right, the only 1 seed left in the Final Four, probably the least likely of all the number 1 seeds to make it to the Final Four, they won the championship. First time in school history, right? And I was very happy I have no dog in the race, right? But if I had to pull for one team, I was pulling for Virginia, for Tony Bennett, who I happen to have gotten to like a little bit as I watch them. I don't know them, but I've watched them, right? But the real reason I was pulling for them is because inside of Virginia is a lot of us, right? Because last year, Virginia was the first team in NCAA history, in March Madness history, to lose, the first number 1 seed to lose to a 16 seed, right? So there's 4 brackets, right? 1 through 16. The ones are all the best teams, right? The 16 seeds are all the worst seeds, the worst teams, right? So the idea is as 1 plays 16, 2 plays 15, and at the end of the day, you want the best teams to match up. So in the history of the NCAA tournament, a 1 seed had never lost to a 16 seed, ever. A 2 seed had lost to a 15 seed a few times, but never in the history of the NCAA tournament had a 1 seed ever lost to a 16 seed. Well, Virginia lost to a 16 seed. And so they had to hear about that, right? And they cried about it. And the seniors on that team have to live their whole lives with that moniker of the team that lost to a 16 seed, right? But what did they do? Right? They turned that failure into fuel, right? And I watched the interview with Coach Bennett, and he said, we didn't run from it, right? We didn't forget it, but we didn't dwell on it, right? So a healthy balance of not forgetting about it, but not dwelling on it is what fueled them. They used that failure to fuel, right? To fuel the workouts, to fuel their film study, to fuel their weight training, to fuel every game of the year, to fuel every time they were down in a game, to fuel everything about this season. They used that failure to push them, right? It wasn't going away, right? And so they flipped it. And so what in our lives can we learn from that? What can we learn from the University of Virginia, right? I'm telling you, I can't imagine a harder interview to give than having to face the media after your team just got beat by a 16 seed, right? Tony Bennett did it with grace, right? And passion, right? He didn't run from it. He didn't dwell on it. He saw it for what it was, right? And then every day after that, it was probably around April 10th of 2018, every day after that, he used that loss as fuel for himself, for his team, for everybody associated with the University of Virginia. And 12 months later, now they have the first NCAA championship in school history. So we can learn from that, right? We can grow from that, right? Because I guarantee you that whatever you're going through, whatever you're afraid of or embarrassed about, it can't be worse than losing to a 16 seed, right? And if you think about it hard enough, there have been several times where you were embarrassed and it felt like the end of the world and it felt like things were not going to get better ever, but you got through it, right? So when you go through things, and you're going to go through a lot of stuff in your life, especially if you're trying to be great, you're going to fail tests. You're going to fail businesses. You're going to fail at some relationships. You're going to do shit wrong. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be embarrassed. You're going to fall down. Right? But instead of running from it and being embarrassed about it, right? Don't dwell on it. Right? But also don't forget about it. Right? Don't forget about it, but also don't dwell on it. And when you can do that as part of your regular programming, when you can be somebody who looks at everything as an opportunity to grow, to learn, as part of the process, when you can do that, you begin to be better at everything in your life. Because you recognize the inevitability of falls, the inevitability of failure, the inevitability of losing, the inevitability of sometimes being embarrassed, sometimes stumbling, right? And when you know it's inevitable, you don't run from it. When you know it's inevitable, you don't shy from it. When you know it's inevitable, you embrace it. And so when things happen to you, right, when you fall down, when you fall short, when you're embarrassed, right, do like Virginia did. Do like Tony Bennett did with his team. Right? Don't run from it. Embrace it. Don't dwell on it, but embrace it. Don't forget about it, but embrace it. And maybe if you do that regularly in your life, then you can begin to use those failures, right? You can begin to use your version of losing to a 16 seed to propel you, to fuel you to become a champion, whatever you want to do. Because I guarantee you, had they not lost that game last year, they wouldn't be a champion today. I promise you. Right? So those stumbles, those failures are inevitable. We don't see it at the time, but I promise you, they studied harder this year. They worked harder this year. They trained harder this year. Right? They gave up less often this year because of that loss, because of that failure. Right? So instead of hiding away, and I've done it. Instead of hiding in your room and crying about it and fall onto your knees, right? If you're going to pray, that's great. Pray, because God will provide guidance, right? But don't hide from it, right? Every failure you have in your life, recognize it for what it is, right? Don't dwell on it, right? But don't shy away from it either, right? Don't forget about it, but don't dwell on it, right? Combine those two, right, to turn that failure into fuel for success, right? Turn that failure into fuel for accomplishment. Turn that failure into fuel for greatness. All right? And so maybe one day we can all look back at those issues, those problems, those setbacks, and we can remember the time when it all shifted, when we used that moment that embarrassed us, that scared us, that made us feel like throwing up, that made us feel like crying. We can use that moment, right, and remember it as a time when we turned that failure into fuel and went from worst, like Virginia did, from worst in our lives to first in our lives. All right, guys? So it's a great lesson. You're going to fall. You're going to stumble. You're going to be embarrassed. Right? You have two choices. You can either hide from it, right? You can eat that failure in your room with the lights off and crying, or you can eat it as fuel to push you forward into greatness. It's your choice, guys. It's your choice. Virginia chose to do it the right way, and you see what happened. Now let's choose to do it the right way, and let's see what happens. All right, guys. Have a great day. I will check back soon. Love you guys. B.T.Y.